Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's BU Industry Insiders webinar, Top Myths of Entrepreneurship. My name is Jeff Murphy, and I'm an Associate Director in the BU Alumni Relations Office, as well as a proud alumnus of the BU Questrom School of Business. Today's webinar is sponsored by the BU Alumni Association and is presented as part of Alumni Career Weeks 2016. The Alumni Association is dedicating the entire month of March to alumni careers with 30 days of networking events, professional development webinars, panel discussions, and more. Whether you're a seasoned professional looking for a change, you're new to the job market, or maybe you just need a little bit of advice to apply to your career, there's likely something happening for you. Registration for our remaining March events is open now, and you can see the full schedule of events that take place both online and in cities around the world at bu.edu/alumni/careerweeks. Before I introduce today's speaker, some brief housekeeping notes. As you know by now, this webinar is being hosted on the Adobe Connect online meeting platform. If you experience any trouble with the audio or visual portions of this presentation, I'll ask that you please contact Adobe Connect directly. If you want to jot down that phone number, it's 1-800-422-3623. Today's presentation is being recorded and will soon be made available for on-demand viewing on the BU Alumni Association website found at bu.edu/alumni. Our speaker today is very eager to answer any questions that you have, and you're welcome to submit them throughout the presentation using the question and answer chat box you should see at the bottom of your screen. We hope to get to as many questions as we can during today's webinar. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for the day. Presenting from Atlanta is BU College of Communication alumnus Mark Myette. Mark is an alternative career coach for the entrepreneur's source, creating trusted, advocacy-based relationships where clients achieve clarity around entrepreneurship. He helps people build rewarding businesses and careers. His unique discovery and education experience empowers his clients to explore alternative career options outside of the traditional job market that could include something entrepreneurial. Throughout Mark's business career, which began in 1983 and where he spent 24 plus years within Fortune 500 companies, he's always loved being an advisor, catalyst, coach, connector, influencer, pioneer, stimulator, and teacher. He's passionate about giving back, volunteering, doing his part to leave the world in a better place, and helping people see things in themselves or in the world that they may not yet see. Mark, as you know, has his BA from Boston University and also has an MBA from Emory University. While attending BU, Mark rode for 4 years on the men's crew team. He served as president of his college's student government and as a vice president in the university-wide student government. He was also a resident assistant at Warren Towers and was awarded the prestigious Scarlet Key Award here at BU. Mark, we also need to add author to your long list of roles that you've played in your life. Congratulations on your most recent book. I know that you're presenting from a really unique location today. I'm going to go ahead and get your slide deck up, and then the floor is all yours.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you all for joining today. And as Jeff indicated, I am joining you from Atlanta, Georgia. And if you hear background noise, forgive me in advance. I'm literally sitting at Turner Field. That's where the Braves play. The season hasn't started here officially, but they're getting the field ready. So occasionally you might hear some background. But with that being said, I welcome you all. And if you're listening to this, whether live or the recorded version, chances are this whole topic of entrepreneurship intrigues you. So for the sake of this presentation, I plan on spending about 35 minutes chatting, and Jeff will be looking at the chat function. In case you've got questions, please bring those up, and then we'll spend the remainder of our time together in a discussion. So Jeff, if you will, please share the agenda slide. Actually, that's going to be me. I know, Jeff. I apologize. I can drive this Chevy, so I'll take it from here. But the top myths, there's so many more than what I have listed, and this is from my perspective. And so you ask somebody else that's an entrepreneur, has been an entrepreneur, they might have different ones. But in my 3.5 years of now working with what I affectionately call entrepreneurs, and I mean that in a positive way, is that there are some myths that sometimes people have brought up that I've heard in a consistent pattern. So this kind of reflects that. What we'll be talking about today, first off, I'd like to identify who's here. We'll then, once we learn that, we're going to really level set the discussion to talk about, what is entrepreneurship. And we'll then go through some of the top myths out there, and then we'll close it out with a hopefully robust conversation and Q&A session. And so, Jeff, at this point, do bring up the poll. And if you can, if you do have internet access, which you're in Adobe, you do, just complete where you're at. And I'd like to get a gauge in regard to who the audience is.
Mark, are you able to see those results as they're coming in?
I can, and thank you very much for
perfect.
those that are responding. I'm seeing that 30% currently working, 15% in transition, 38% considering doing something entrepreneurial. So that's great. Glad you're here. And then we have 15% that's currently an owner. So thank you so much for responding. That gives me a good idea. For the sake of this presentation now, I want to level set what a couple definitions of entrepreneurship are. And this one is taken from something that's a little bit more culture focus, pop focus on the entourage is one. And that's one I like to use every once in a while. The one I like to really zero in on is what you have to be an entrepreneur, and taking the entrepreneur defined from Merriam-Webster in the dictionary, they define it as one who organizes, manages, assumes the risk and rewards of a business or enterprise. So really for us and for me, it's about giving you and hopefully us a level set that's at the core of what an entrepreneur is. Somebody who basically runs a business. Now, let's get into some of the myths. And one of the myths, and here you're going to start hearing some background noise, so I apologize, but one of the myths is the only entrepreneurs are those who do startups. And if you look at the pure definition of what an entrepreneurship is previously, that's one of the myths I try to communicate and have my clients begin to understand. The reality is what I've defined in the book that Jeff alluded to earlier, a band, something called the E-band. This is something that I've defined that basically identifies, when you look at the concept of entrepreneurship and what it means to be an entrepreneur, there's really a band. And the band really allows someone to lean in on the concept of entrepreneur. On one end of the band, you have a startup. As you move further to the right, another way of being an entrepreneur is to own and to run a standalone business. As you go further down on the band, other options that do involve entrepreneurship is a concept or a category I call businesses in a box. So it could be biz ops, it could be independent owner operator type things, licensing, franchises is where that category falls. And then the last one is something, it's a 1099 contractor. And each one of those in its own way is in one way or another a entrepreneur. The opportunity for people to figure out is like, where do I fit or where do I fall on this band? The next myth that I hear of and read about also in doing the research is there's a concept that entrepreneurs are born. There are different schools of thought about this. The reality is researchers, although they have concluded that entrepreneurial attributes are usually baked in by the time somebody is 14 years old, there's some attributes that show up as dominant. There's some that show up as contributing. In other words, they can turn them on and off. And then some show up as supporting. So what the same researchers will indicate in their research is, although those attributes are baked by the time someone's 14, its life experiences, work experiences, its education experiences really will either continue to refine those attributes or not refine the attributes. And for those that are wondering what those attributes are, at the end of this, towards the end of this presentation, I'll bring up what some of them are. So stay tuned. Another myth that usually that comes up is the younger the better. The reality is researchers have identified that new entrepreneurs over the age of 40 do have a higher propensity of succeeding in their ventures. So as this indicates, although entrepreneurs may be, or their attributes may be baked by the time they're 14, it's really experience and education, and the opportunity to hone skills, to build networks, to really become self-actualized that allows someone that does decide, if they're over 40, to go down the entrepreneurial road. Their success, their probability of success will be at least in their favor. The other myth is ideas happen in the shower. And it's funny because I'll have conversations with people, and as we see in the shows that are popularized today, whether it's Shark Tank or any other reality-based entrepreneur-based program, is people will sometimes say to me, I'm really interested in doing a business. I just haven't come up with my idea yet, which supports, I'm trying to come up with my idea in the shower. The reality is based on the previous point, which is older entrepreneurs have a tendency to be more successful from a success rate based on their networks, based on industry and customer insights, and the ideas may not actually be theirs, but because they've served in a particular industry or served a particular customer base, they're usually being made keenly aware of needs or opportunities in the markets or in the areas that they're focusing on. So in some ways, those ideas come through a day-to-day interaction of, quote, doing a job. The next myth that comes up, and I hear this even from career coaches, is like, focus on your passion, and if you focus on your passion and you do a business around that, then you'll be well on your way to being successful because you're focusing on your passion. Well, they're partly true. The reality is that channel your passion, whether it's customer service, whether it's helping people, whether it's making a difference, whether it's solving problems. Align those passions with your skills, your attributes, and how do those attributes line up in the, quote, I like to say, day in the life, and what is required to be successful in a business is just as important. So yeah, it's great having passion, but it's also very important to have some of the other things that I've indicated here. The other myth that I hear and have to debunk every once in a while, that people view entrepreneurs being their own boss is the holy grail. One of these days I really look forward to not having to work for somebody else but working for myself, because then I'll be in control, unlike what I feel in a job. Well, the reality is as people that move over from a job to doing something entrepreneurial, over time they quickly realize that although they are definitely in more control of what they will do in their business day to day, the reality is that the sense of control is and can be just as unpredictable and stressful. The caveat is that in some ways, and this is worth discussion, is it's a, quote, healthier stress, as long as the business is doing what it's supposed to do and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And there's difference between negative stress and positive stress. In this case, most entrepreneurs, if you ask them, would they envision going back to their previous life, whether it's a corporate role or a job? And a majority of them will always generally say no. They definitely are glad they made this decision, but the caveat will always be, I've made a decision, but let me share, it's not easy. It hasn't been, but it's been very rewarding. So reality there. Another myth is and this comes up from every once in a while, which holds people back, is depending on what the business might be and where they fall on the entrepreneurial band, people sometimes get in their own way by making assumptions that they don't want to or they can't afford to start a business. And there's a myth that you should expect to fund it yourself if you're going to be doing a business. The reality is, it depends. It's amazing, and I counsel people that it might be earlier on. I'll just counsel and just have them really focus on something as simple as a good credit score, because you will be amazed what a good credit score will provide you access to, especially depending upon what kind of business, what kind of service, what kind of product, what type of business it is, where it is on the E-band. It really will vary. And so there are opportunities for funding, whether it might be self-funding or it might be traditional bank funding, or it might be SBA, it might be secured, unsecured. So don't necessarily assume that if you start a business that you're going to have to do 100% self-funding, because that's really not the reality. Another myth, successful entrepreneurs are monetarily rich. Reality is entrepreneurs who go into business first and foremost to become rich really, at the end of the day, are not long for the work, because their motivation and their mission is misguided. The quality, though, for those that decide to go down that entrepreneurial road, the quality of life for them, for entrepreneurs, and it can be argued that you'll have some folks that might not be as satisfied or might not be making as much as they were in their corporate role, and that data point is supported by the fact that entrepreneurs, there are outliers, of course, that are multi-millionaire, billionaire types, but the vast majority of entrepreneurs sometimes make less money overall than what they made in a corporate role. The difference, though, is the quality of life is better, and then also the subtlety is how they're able to evaluate, or how they're able to report on a quarterly basis what their expenses are. There are certain expenses that you can write off when you're filing your quarterly taxes that if you're in a traditional job, you cannot. And so they may not on paper be making, quote, as much as they were in a corporate role. Usually their lifestyle is better overall, because they've been able to have the lifestyle that supports and the business to support their particular lifestyle. Another myth is entrepreneurs have no work/life balance. And in some businesses that might in fact be the case, where they may feel pressured to keep the lights on, to keep doing the business. If you read E-Myth Revisited, they use a story of someone that was passionate about baking pies, and at the end of the day, baking pies became the bane of their existence because they had no work-life balance. But the reality is it really depends. As I alluded, studies have indicated that satisfaction rates of entrepreneurs are higher than those who work for somebody else, partly because they in many ways can control how they spend their time and what their lifestyle will actually be. There are some business owners that go into a business knowing that they want to work only Monday to Friday. They don't want to work 7 days a week. They only want to work part-time. They only want to do it. Some might go into it and say, I'll start active, then I'll go semi-active, and then eventually I'd love to have a managing director that will run my business for me, and I'll become almost what is referred to as an absentee owner. There's ways that you can actually do it, but myth is entrepreneurs have no life and they're very dysfunctional. Not necessarily the case. Another one which supports that supports the passion is focus on your talents. And as you kind of get an idea from my previous response to a similar myth, is although focusing on your talents is not a bad start, you really need resources to focus on the areas that might not be your core talents. And the next two slides I'm going to bring up are going to elicit, a little bit more talking about what the talents are, what your focus needs to be, regardless of what the business might be that you may think you might want to start or get involved in. And for those that saw my presentation or were part of it last year, I identified what entrepreneurial strengths that science has identified that are generally baked by the time you're 14 years old. And there are 10. And there's ways to assess which ones are dominant, which ones are not so dominant, which ones are downright weak. And these are in no set order. So everybody that actually does this scientifically based assessment, they may come up with 10, a different order of what those attributes are. The key thing for people is to identify and understand what are my attributes, and then more importantly, understand what am I not so strong in, because just as important as it is to understand and know what your strengths are, it's also to understand what are my weaknesses so that I can have a resource to help me in that part of that attribute that might be important in my business. To carry that one step further, for those that also participated in the presentation last year, identified a book by an author by the name of Michael Gerber, Think of the Baby Food, and he wrote a book called E-Myth Revisited. In his book, he identifies 7 centers of management attention that people need to be accountable for, or some way in their business have a focus in. His contention is, similar to the previous slide, you don't have to do all 7, you don't have to be great at all 7, but you need some sort of resource to support the 7. And this slide pretty much illustrates what they are. We'll go through them in order quickly though. Leadership is, that's at the heart of your business, developing your vision for your business. The other is marketing, understanding your best customers. Another is money. How do you establish, track, and maintain predictable cash flow? Management. How do you assemble, motivate the right team? Lead generation. How do you attract your target market? Lead conversion. How do you create a predictable sales system? And client fulfillment. How do you deliver on your promise every single time that you're doing your business? And it's interesting, when I talk to people that are prospectively thinking about doing a business, and when it comes to business development, and I ask them, well, do you have any sales experience? They say, no, but I can do it. I think I can do the sales part. The reality of it is, if you haven't sold, or if that's not in your sweet spot, be prepared for having the realization that you're going to need some sort of resource to do the selling for you. So the key thing to answer is, are you ready for the next version of you? Well, to answer that question and to really continue to go down this discovery, if you will, there are some resources. One is folks like me. As Jeff indicated, I'm an alternative career coach. I'm not a traditional career coach. I don't work on people's resumes, don't work with people's interviewing skills, but what I do is help people figure out whether or not doing something entrepreneurial is in their best interest or not. Another is a book. Jeff alluded to the book that I recently published, and it's available on Amazon, and it's called Entrepreneur, and I mean it in a positive way, by the way. Do you have what it takes to be an entrepreneur? Another is, we've got being all alums at the great institution of BU, we've got a great resource in the Alumni Career Development Office, so please lean in on that resource as well. And then, of course, peers, colleagues, customers. As I alluded to the fact that entrepreneurs are generally older, well, not generally, but those that are older have a propensity for greater success because of peers, colleagues, and customers that they've accumulated through their professional career. Eventually, you'll need an accountant. Eventually, you'll need an attorney. and eventually you might need an organization that helps you with your business plan if in fact doing a startup makes sense for you on that entrepreneurial band. So, Jeff. And then, of course, local economic development office is, and if you do a Google search for local economic development office, you will probably find an office near you. All of these are resources that will help you begin to navigate and answer the $64,000 question, should I go down that entrepreneurial road? So, Jeff, I know I was going pretty quick, and that was intentional. Let's have a quick discussion, and if people have questions, please sound off.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So a reminder for everybody, please take this chance. We've got an entrepreneurship expert online. Chat in with your question just using the Q&A chat box at the bottom of your screen. While those are coming in, I also want to mention, Mark, you mentioned a couple times that you've done another webinar for us. Thank you so much for that. And I want to let everybody know, if you're somebody who's having thoughts about going down this entrepreneurship path, that's a great place to start. I know a lot of the topics that are probably covered in your book, Mark, are things that you talked about briefly in that webinar, and so everybody can find those at on our website, which is bu.edu/alumni, and then just by adding webinars on the end of that, you can access our library of on-demand webinars. Mark, we do have a couple questions that have come in. The first one has come in from Virginia. She is wondering how you would answer the question of somebody who says, you know, I'm interested in being an entrepreneur, but I'm just not sure that I would be a good boss of myself. How would you address that question from somebody?
Well, I think the answer is beholden in the individual, and part of that is if you have that self-efficacy where you know about yourself that you probably need some sort of accountability in place, then you know that's part of what you analyze. What type of environment do I seem to be best suited? Am I best to work in not a home office, but I'd be best to serve in some sort of shared space, or do I need a physical office? What type of business would afford me the ability to be in business for myself, but maybe not by myself? So in other words, we talked about the E-band and the business in a box. Many times people will go that route because they do like to be in business for themselves, or they're enamored by that concept, but by the same token, they want a support mechanism that they can compare notes with, that people will work with them and they can share what their best practices are. And then another way to address that is, besides self-efficacy, is eventually if you do decide to go down that entrepreneurial road, it's not unusual for what's referred to as people investing in and having what's called a business coach. People that literally will work with you and have a retainer to work with you. And they become literally just that, a business coach whose self-interest is to help you maximize your business opportunity that you are establishing.
Great. I'm glad we have a lot of time for questions because we've got some really good ones that have come in. First and foremost, Robin is just wondering if she could get a look at the previous slide. She wants to take a screenshot of it. So, Robin, here you are. This is that slide you were asking for. Go ahead and take a screenshot of that. And then I know, Mark, you have some other sort of follow-up slides at the end that you want to show. Pamela has asked a really interesting question. For somebody who's an up-and-coming entrepreneur just getting started, what do you think is more important, Mark, a website or a LinkedIn profile?
LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn profile, because remember I talked about one of the key concepts of an entrepreneur is their network. And hey, let's face it, yeah, people will probably want to do a Google search and on your company. But if you're starting your business and you are the face of the business, guess what? The second place they'll go to will be your LinkedIn profile. The other thing I'll share, and this is what sometimes trips up entrepreneurs, is they have an approach that everything needs to be perfect before they, quote, launch their business. There's a great saying that I like to share, which is, if you wait till perfect, it's too late. So Build your bike as you're riding it. So if you have a strong LinkedIn profile, you have a strong network, you have strong recommendations for the product or service that you have, or which speaks to your ability as a business owner, then that's probably just as powerful, if not more so, than a dedicated website. Long-winded way to say, start with your LinkedIn.
No, obviously we wanted an explanation as to why you chose that answer, so thank you, Mark. Kevin's wondering, with your business, do you support your clients with decisions about incorporating, finding accountants, attorneys? Are you all sort of a one-stop shop for those up-and-coming entrepreneurs that you're working with?
Absolutely. Now, I do not practice law, do not practice accountancy, but usually what you'll want is eventually to have those conversations. So part of the conversations I will have with my clients, if in fact it makes sense for them to go down this road, will be almost like a checklist. The next thing you need to zero in on is how will you be incorporated, and so that will involve an accountant. If somebody is wanting to also sign some agreements, that will also involve an attorney. So usually in the beginning, I'm I call it the alternate career coach, and then on the back end, if it makes sense, I become almost like Julie on the Love Boat, for those people that are graduated in 1983 like me that remember that show. But it's somebody that becomes like a connector, introduce people to resources. So yes, to answer your question.
Barbara's got an interesting question that I think sort of could be a whole other webinar, but definitely speaks to entrepreneurship myths. What's the most common mistake for new entrepreneurs or businesses?
You're absolutely right, Jeff. This is a whole different, there's different webcasts altogether. Is there one reason? Repeat the question and I'll come up with a quick answer and then we'll elaborate.
What are the common mistakes that new entrepreneurs or new businesses frequently make?
They underestimate the time, resources, both human as well as financial, that it will take to make their business viable. It's probably the number one thing that they underestimate. Usually people underestimate it, where they say, I'll be profitable in 2, 3, 4, 5 quarters, whatever. Usually what happens is one of the key reasons why businesses eventually close or shut down is they're undercapitalized and they run out of money. So chances are that's people underestimate the human and financial resources.
So that's obviously a fundamental flaw in any business plan, right, Mark? Is that something, this organization that you mentioned, SCORE, is that a place that helps people develop solid business plans?
For people that are looking to do a startup and wanting to actually it makes sense. I mean, there are a tremendous amount of resources out there, whether it's SCORE, whether now there's some online tools that exist to put business plans together for funding and also business planning. So yes, there are resources like that that will help people set that up. And part of that business plan is creating budgets and understanding what that is. Now, remember what I talked about previously about websites and things like that? Sometimes people hold back doing something because, again, they have to have everything lined up. Sometimes you'll talk to entrepreneurs that have been doing a business and they say, well, how advanced was your business plan? And they chuckle because the business plan was on the back of a cocktail napkin. No lie. So it really partly varies by how you are wired. But if you need to have everything battened down and I's dotted, T's crossed, then you might be setting yourself up for a long haul. So business plans important, but not as critical per se as probably having an actual business idea with potential customers identified that's serving a specific need.
Frank has an interesting question that I'm going to go ahead and guess in advance. There is not a right or wrong answer to, but I'd be curious to hear your take on it, Mark. Is there a greater success rate when you have 2 to 3 trusted partners from the get-go versus going down this path all alone? Do partners create more problems down the road than it is potentially worth than doing this on your own?
That's a really good question that I don't have a data point for, but the way I'll answer it without a yes or no would be that it's like anything else. The more people involved in your business entity, the more people involved in advising and being a resource, and you're selecting the right folks, the better. Uh, and remember the 10 attributes that we had up there? And I'll bring them up quickly as I have to go back to this rebuild. But remember this slide here that identifies the 10 attributes. If you've got some advisors, then I would suggest that you have advisors that might have attributes in a nice balanced approach. So you might have a creative thinker, you might have somebody that's good at sales, and then by the same token, you have another advisor that's really good at monetizing the business. How do you become profitable? So that's a business focus. You have somebody else that's very good at relationship building. You have somebody else that's really good at assessing risk. So striking a balance, you can go a long way towards setting yourself up for success. By the same token, as this slide indicates, if you've got a number of advisors, let me bring that back, if you've got a number of advisors, identify which talents they're bringing to the table, and if you have a nice balanced approach, heck, I would suggest that if you have that approach, then and you've got all the bases checked and all the boxes checked off, then the only question at that point is how you all interact with each other and play in the sandbox. But that tells me, though, that you'll probably be more prone for success because of what you've done to set up your enterprise and how you support it.
I have to say kudos to the questions that are coming in today. We've got some great ones, and Elle has another really good one. So Mark, setting up an entrepreneurship business involves honing your services and products, marketing and understanding your client base, as well as the business planning and operations side of things. These are all interrelated, but I wonder if you have recommendations about the sequencing. Should one of these things or something else come first?
It all starts with a need. So what need, customer need, whether it's a consumer, whether it's a business, what need, what void are you filling? We see this in disruptive entrepreneurial endeavors. Dare say Uber. Uber came as a result of this dearth and scarcity of affordable transportation in major metropolitan cities, and they kind of changed the model because there was this pent up demand for not only people that are willing to supplement their income by becoming drivers, but more importantly, it started with the most important need, which is people needed ways to be able to navigate through metropolitan cities without having to drive themselves.
Great, and then Pamela is asking a question that I think maybe takes us in a different direction, but Pamela's question is, how do I learn more about lead conversion? Pamela, I want to jump in and actually let you know, I don't know if you participated in the webinar that we had just about a week ago, but we had a great one. Another alum did a whole webinar for us about leads, and so another opportunity to go back and view our previously recorded webinars at bu.edu/alumni/webinars. But Mark, any thoughts, quick thoughts on that, about how do you learn more about lead conversion?
Well, and the fact that you're asking that question would tell me that that might not be in your wheelhouse. And if it isn't, that's where you have so many resources out there today, whether it's social media experts, lead conversion experts, lead generation experts, and leveraging technology to do that, and more importantly, convert them. There's all sorts of resources that you can lean in on to basically be successful with that aspect of your business. This too, as Jeff's alluded to, is a separate webcast all unto itself.
Yeah.
As evidenced by one that we just had 2 weeks ago.
That's right. Always good to have a plug for our previously recorded webinar library. Barbara's got another kind of nuts and bolts question that, again, I know you're not a lawyer, Mark, but is there a corporate structure from your experience that you've seen works better than another to get started?
It depends. If it's a solopreneur type opportunity where it's just you, or it's a home-based enterprise, then it could be argued that any number of structures will be appropriate, whether it's LLC, S Corp, C Corp, sole proprietor. It all depends upon, and this is where having an accountant really comes into play, because they'll want to find out what is the business, what are you projecting in regard to revenue, how the model's going to work, what your 5 to 10 year plan might be, and then they'll also educate you about what the various risk is within each entity. I personally am an S Corp, and I did that intentionally because I wanted to just basically protect myself and my family and our personal assets in the business that I was doing, because I didn't want to have that susceptible. With different corporate structures that you can set up, there are some that leave yourself open to having your personal assets approached if somebody wants to pursue them legally. And we all live in the most litigious society in the world. It's a big thing to consider. That's why I say lean in on the accountant to help understand what your entity is going to be and what you hope to accomplish, and they can help you decide which entity would make most sense.
Mark, we obviously had some questions today from people who have obviously been thinking about this and had some real specific questions. If anybody's interested in following up with you after this webinar, what's the best way for them to do that?
So what I'm going to do is let me just go quickly ahead to the last slide. The best way to go will be beyond this slide. Reach out to me through the email, reach out to me in LinkedIn, reach out to me over the phone. I love to chat with people, regardless of where you're at, even if it's to answer some of your questions. But I like to think I or my fellow alternative career coaches are great resources to help you work through that. So here's the best way to get me.
Well, Mark, I know you and I have met personally and talked quite a bit. I know how dedicated you are to helping people change their lives. I know that's not just something that you say. I know that's something that you're walking the walk there. So, on behalf of the BU Alumni Office, I want to thank you so much for sharing your time and talent and knowledge with the BU alumni community. Over the last year, you've made so many opportunities for people to pick your brain. So, just wanted to say thanks again for doing this and being here today.
My absolute pleasure, Jeff, and thank you all, and thank you for giving me the opportunity just to share some of my knowledge. I hope it was helpful.
We really appreciate it. And my thanks also go out to all of our guests for participating today. We actually have one more webinar coming up this month during the remaining days of Alumni Career Weeks. It's going to be a great one about fighting age discrimination with your resume. And we also have some really exciting online speed networking events that we're launching a series we're going to be doing every month. So I encourage you to take a look at those things that we've got going on by going to our website at bu.edu/alumni. And as always, if you or any BU alum would be interested in presenting a professional development webinar or have a topic that you'd like to showcase for BU industry insiders, feel free to contact me at the Alumni Relations Office or by email at jt as in Thomas Murphy at bu.edu. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I certainly want to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day as a Murphy here in Boston. Have a great day or a great evening wherever you might be.
Thank you all.